We're used to superheroes coming in and saving the day, but being a superhuman doesn't mean that you can't make mistakes. Here are the top 10 worst decisions superheroes have made. At number 10, we have Thor not aiming for Thanos' head. This is of course in reference to the Infinity War storyline when Thanos collects all the Infinity Stones and Thor fails to kill him at a crucial moment. This is a huge and extremely costly mistake because if he had lined up his blow properly, he would have saved half of the population, including a handful of his friends. Honestly, this is probably the most costly mistake ever made by a superhero in terms of sheer numbers of lives lost, but the only reason why it sits in this position is that I don't really blame Thor in this instance. There had been countless attempts on Thanos' life and it just seemed like he was untouchable during this time. Besides, the pressure was on, and although it was a mistake, there are other entries on this list that could have been avoided much more easily than this one. But you're not off the hook, Thor, this entry still had to go on the list. At number 9, we have the time when Spider-Man tried to save Gwen Stacy with a web and accidentally killed her. By the work of the Green Goblin, Gwen is plummeting to her death over the edge of a bridge, and Spidey makes a last-minute attempt to save her life by shooting a web her way. It grips onto her leg, but unfortunately the whiplash from the sudden change of velocity breaks her neck and kills her. Yeah, spoiler alert for anyone who didn't know that happens in the comics. This is a very brutal mistake for Spider-Man, who has done this trick a number of times without issue, but something slipped in the Amazing Spider-Man number 121 and the Green Goblin gets the win. Although I don't even know if it's really considered a win, to be honest. It's pretty tragic and it kind of breaks us out of the fun of this issue and into a pretty devastating moment in Spider-Man's life. Arguably one of the most traumatic, I'd say. Anyway, I put this one further to the back of the list just because, like the one before, how was he supposed to know? He just didn't really expect this to go down the way it does. It's alright, Spidey, we all make mistakes. Although this one is pretty bad. At number 8 is the time when the Avengers sent the Hulk into space. This was a mistake for a few reasons. Firstly, they should have known that it's not a fair move to send your friend to an alien planet just because he can be too much. Even though they thought he could live happily on another planet, they screwed up just a little by sending him to a war-torn celestial body called Sakaar. There, the Hulk is tortured and enslaved, being forced to partake in gladiatorial tournaments for months. I don't know what the Avengers were expecting here because Hulk comes back to Earth in full force with a team of warriors called the Warbound and wreak absolute havoc. They cause so much destruction that they nearly damage the tectonic plates of the Earth permanently. All just because the Avengers were tired of his temperament. Although I can't talk, the Hulk can be a lot and I wouldn't personally volunteer to babysit him myself. At number 7, we have Batman not killing the Joker. This one isn't based on one particular instance, but it's a mistake that Batman makes time and time again. Of course, if he were to kill the Joker, we'd have a much less fun time with Batman's story. So I'm assuming this is something that the writers are just choosing not to have happen. But in the context of the greater good of humanity and Gotham, it's clearly the best move to take out the Joker for good. I can point to one instance where hesitating to do this came back and bit Batman in the behind as a pretty clear result. And that would be the time when his partner, Jason Todd, is killed by the Joker, because when Todd comes back from the dead and sees that there was basically no revenge taken on the Joker, this is one of the main reasons why Jason goes over the edge and turns against Batman and turns into the Red Hood. If Batman wasn't so dang good, he could have saved not only thousands of lives as time went on, but he could have avoided having to deal with a disgruntled ex-partner, and the Red Hood is really no joke, so this is a doozy. At number 6 is Superman deciding to fight Batman. In the Dark Knight Returns storyline, an evil Superman faces off against a very well-equipped and clever as ever Bruce Wayne. Now, it could be argued that Superman wasn't in his right mind, so this wasn't really a choice he could have avoided making in the first place, but I also think there was probably more at play here than just mind control. I think Superman also probably underestimated Batman a little bit in this case, because to be fair, why would he not? Let's be honest, we all weren't sure what would happen with this matchup. Superman is an alien with a top tier power set and Batman is a human. A very impressive human, but a human nonetheless. And it's pretty rough the way that Batman schools Superman at the end of this storyline, even though it does end with Batman having a heart attack. But it comes very, very close, and arguably closer to death than Superman's ever been, other than the time when he does get killed. Anyway, Superman should have just ignored the government altogether and left Batman alone on this one. At number 5 is the time when Daredevil reveals his secret identity and then declares himself the head of the underground crime ring in New York City. After Kingpin is shot 7 times, blinded, and stabbed in the chest over and over, Daredevil assumes he's dead, which is totally fair, because he was really screwed up. But it's Kingpin after all. He's huge and somehow survives this, comes back to reclaim the throne as the head of the underground crime ring. But Daredevil beats him up again within an inch of his life, this poor guy, and this is where he makes a huge mistake. Out of fear that another bad guy will try and take over in Kingpin's place, Daredevil decides he needs to be the one to take over instead. He declares, "I'm not protecting the city anymore, I'm running it," and then he reveals his face. Now, with most of the major criminals in New York knowing he's in fact Matt Murdock, they understandably start believing he's their new boss as well, and start treating him that way. So in one swift mistake, Daredevil reveals his identity to all the most dangerous people in New York and changes his moral alignment. And I'm not even sure he wanted to do any of it. Maybe the power just got to him? I don't know. At number 4 is the time when Iron Man fights Machine Man when he's drunk and almost kills 2 civilians. During the Demon in a Bottle storyline, Tony Stark falls victim to alcoholism and he starts to act more and more erratic and violent throughout it. He decides to give up his life as a civilian, dropping his role at Stark Industries and going full force as a superhero. The only issue is that he's drunk while flying around most of the time, which is a problem for many reasons. One time, Tony Stark runs into friendly superhero Machine Man and is too drunk to understand the hero's intentions, so he attacks Machine Man in what could only be described as a drunken rage. When Stark tries to hit Machine Man with a pole, he misses and is about to hit 2 innocent bystanders instead. Luckily, Machine Man gets to them in time and moves them out of the way, but it's dangerously close to being Iron Man's first civilian fatality, directly at least. I'm sure while he's facing off against Ultron, there's some deaths in all those buildings and stuff they just don't seem to care about, but okay. Later, Stark recounts the incident in Iron Man / Captain America Casualties of War and explains how he was an inch away from being a murderer. So it clearly gets to him. Stay away from booze, kids, it's not worth it. At number 3 is the time when Professor X loses an entire team of teen mutants on a suicide mission. In Giant Size X-Men number 1, there's a disturbance on a mysterious island called Krakoa, so Professor X sends a team of X-Men to the island to see what's going on, but they go missing. All except for Cyclops, who comes back and tells Professor X that the island is in fact sentient. So Professor X sends another team over to investigate the disappearance. This team includes Wolverine, Colossus, Storm, Thunderbird, and Nightcrawler. This isn't the worst of it though. Years later, this new team discovered that they weren't the first team that was ever sent over to investigate the missing X-Men. He had first sent a team of younger teen mutants, one of which being Cyclops' brother Gabriel, and it turns out that the members of this secret team had been either killed or completely absorbed by Krakoa. Naturally, Cyclops vows to never forgive Professor X for this, and as a result, Xavier is forced to wipe his mind so he forgets that he ever had a brother in the first place. Pretty brutal mistake. At number 2 is the mistake of creating Ultron. For obvious reasons, this is one of the biggest mistakes ever made by any superheroes. First designed as part of a peacekeeping program, Ultron is an AI that Tony Stark and Bruce Banner actually create themselves. What screws this up, however, is a deep irony that speaks to the nature of humanity as a whole. The original programming directive given to Ultron is naturally to bring peace on Earth, but as the AI gains access to the internet and witnesses the history of the human race, it deems that humanity is, in fact, the greatest threat to peace on Earth. So he sticks to his programming and decides he needs to destroy all of humanity, the Avengers included, considering they do not want humanity to go extinct. This is an honest mistake by the two geniuses, but it's no doubt a huge mistake that ends up costing many lives and a huge headache for the Avengers. At number 1 is one of the most popular mistakes made by a superhero, and that is the time when Spider-Man reveals his identity to the world during the Civil War storyline. Now, this is during a pretty confusing and troubling time for superheroes as a whole, with the Sokovia Accords in play. With the two sides of the Avengers divided, Spider-Man finds himself on the side that is all for the agreement. The agreement being that non-sanctioned vigilantism should be criminalized. With Tony Stark as Spider-Man's mentor, Peter Parker trusts in his suggestion to unmask himself on live television. This is justified as a measure of good faith to their accordance with this new agreement, but it's not a good idea and naturally backfires right away. The same day that Peter reveals himself to the world, a crazed fanatic tries to shoot him, and then down the line a hitman shoots Aunt May and Tony Stark himself tries to arrest Peter Parker. It's just a huge mess that could have been avoided had Peter taken a second to really trust his own instincts and keep with the golden rule that a hero should never reveal their true identity. Alright, that's the list. Did you agree? Disagree? Leave it all down below in the comments. Let me know if I missed any big mistakes that superheroes have made, and maybe we'll put a part 2 together if you like this one. This has been Top 10 Nerd. I've been your host, Ben Ball. We'll see you on the next one. Stay nerdy.